Alabama decided late last week that although the Supreme Court had insisted that they needed to go back to the drawing board on their basically their gerrymandering of districts and create a second majority black congressional district, they're just not gonna do that. And they didn't. In their new map, they decided not to do that, effectively giving a major middle finger to the Supreme Court of the United States, which I will remind you is a supermajority of conservatives. But that is still not enough for them. And so what they did was they released a plan that would increase the share of black voters in one of the 6 majority white congressional districts from 30 to 40%, which is nice. They're not gonna be able to win in that district necessarily, and it doesn't give them what the Supreme Court demanded they do, but that is what they were willing to do. They also, by the way, dropped the percentage of black voters in the only one majority black district to 51% from 55%, potentially allowing it to be flipped. So look, I would love to go super in depth on this. I just wanna give you an overall idea of how bad the situation is in Alabama. So the 2020 presidential vote share, if we can bring up graphic 4, it's gonna show you Donald Trump got 62% of the vote. Joe Biden got almost 37%. So, not super close, but it is not 100% Republican. But in terms of the congressional delegation, it is, let's see, that's 6/7 Republican, which means that the one extra seat that the Democrats should get based on the numbers, they do not. And in fact, in the map, that one district, District 7, could potentially flip to Republican. You could have no black, no Democratic representation, and that's after a direct order from the SCOTUS. What do you think, Francesca?
Wild. I mean, I think state legislatures at this point, we realize like these are the sites of power and of struggle. Like this is where we have to take aim because they do this kind of stuff. They do this stuff all the time where they're overriding the will of their own voters. Now they're just openly ignoring the Supreme Court. So now what? Now what do we do? Is the Supreme Court like, where do we go from here? I don't think I've watched this far into the movie. These are like, like after the credits sequence here, where I think there's some sort of consequences if you do that. And if you disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of voters. And again, like you talk about the civil rights, when we talk about like, the Voting Rights Act being gutted. This is what we're talking about. This is why it matters. This is why former southern states, former slaveholding states, sorry, I'm bringing it back to our history, right? This is why we still have to make sure that their democracies are actually functioning to serve all of the people who live in their states, because if left to their own devices, they will gerrymander them into oblivion, and they will absolutely try and take their vote away.
100%. We don't need to speculate. This is not obviously this is not the first time, but this is like, it's the conservatives literally just telling them, you just have to have 2 districts. That's it. You can still overwhelmingly represent the state. You can do that, but you need to give 2 districts, and they're saying no. So we're gonna see, will there be consequences? What will the Supreme Court do? Stay tuned. The fate of democracy might be on the line.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.